Can you hear me, folks? Yeah? So thank you very much for staying with us. This is pretty much the graveyard slot. There's almost as many of us up here as there is of you out there. So well done to all of you who have stuck it out. We're just waiting for some of the city's students to come and join us because they're going to make a contribution to this final session. But while we're waiting, let me just say a little bit about what we hope to do in this final slot. And also, before I forget, let me just say that it's unusual these days for me to stand with a panel as a man with a panel of men at the front. We did have a female contributor. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it. She pulled out through ill health. So we're all blokes up here today. So if you want to give feedback on that aspect of this or any other aspect of the program, this is a learning experience for the city. Those who have been organising it have worked really hard, but I think all of us feel that you need to get as much feedback as you can. We want your candid, honest reactions to this event. We can only get better by listening to what you say and hearing your experience. There's a number of ways you can do that. Outside in the main foyer, there's a flip chart sheet, so you can go and grab a marker pen and write your comments there. There's an email address there you can email. There's also a website you'll know about. There's a number of ways you can feedback to us. If you're rushing off for a train or a bus or whatever at the end of today, you get back to us later on. But we do really want to hear from you, so please let us know how you found the day and tell us how we can make it better next time around. Okay? So, in this final slot, we're going to pick up on some of the key themes we've heard up in the previous session and really earlier on today. Prior to this, we heard a bit about the importance of politics. We heard about the importance of place. We talked about the frustration, and we're on the back here of European elections. We're across Europe. There have been decisive and sort of sweeping comments about the way we run, the way we govern things. So this is a big ticket conversation, and the timing's excellent. And we have with us today five political leaders. We have Henk Kool, who's the Deputy Mayor of The Hague in the Netherlands. We also have James Alexander, who many of you will know, who's the leader of York City Council. We have Glyn Jones from Doncaster, who's kindly agreed at the last minute to step in for Julie Dorr, who had to withdraw from Sheffield. We've got Marco Seresti from Peterborough City Council. And then we also have Simon Blackburn from Blackpool. So a number of different places with different perspectives. We have different political colours, I think, across the floor, which I think is also important in terms of that cross-party conversation that we've also talked about today. So, and just to say where I fit into this, I live in York. I work as an advisor to the European Union URBAC programme, which is the cities programme based in Paris. We fund the European cities to work together on shared problems. We talked today about many of those shared problems, so I'm here with my citizens hat on just to coordinate this conversation and try to keep these guys to time, so wish me luck with that. So without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Henk, who's going to get us started. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies, well, indeed, the room is a little bit more empty than this morning when we started, so I hope our task is to empty the room totally. So. Well, there is a lot of inequality, for instance, language. You are all native English speakers, and I'm not. So that's a problem. So I hope you understand me as well. I do my utmost to make my understandable. Well, as an alderman of The Hague, I'm responsible for economy, social affairs, and employment. And that's a very good task altogether, because, well, when I'm working at the economy, I'm working at employment, and when I'm working at employment, I'm working also to reduce the people who are benefits the social welfare, and I'm also responsible for that. So I'm actually constantly busy to help myself. That's actually the case. But before I start, I start with an overview of my activities in Europe, because I'm also quite active in Europe. That's why I learned to know Eddie. And thank you very much for the invitation today. I'm very honored with that. But I'm a member of the Committee of the Regions, and the Committee of the Regions is also an advisory board to the European Commission. It's a little bit different than Maureen. Maureen is from the Economic and Social Committee, but I'm from the Committee of Regions. The members are representatives of local and regional authorities, and we give advice to the European Commission about all kinds of policy concerning local and regional authorities. Besides that, I'm also a member of the board of Eurocities, and Eurocities is a foundation of bigger European cities. And myself, I'm the chair of the Social Affairs Forum, and the Social Affairs Forum of Eurocities counts about 80 cities. And in our strategy paper, we have pointed out 3 different priorities: working on getting young people back on track, for instance, on the education or on a job. Another one is to reduce poverty, and because of the crisis, we don't want to lose people that get into trouble, so in this age of austerity. We have already done a lot of work, and we are working together with a lot of enthusiastic people from different cities. So we achieved a lot of results during my chairmanship, and of course I don't want to show off, but I want to mention a few. We are focusing on implementing the social investment package. It was mentioned earlier today, the package to improve social inclusion, or to say it in other words, fight social exclusion and fight poverty. We're contributing to a mid-term review of the Europe 2020 strategy. We're monitoring of the implementation of the youth employment package at local level. We're shaping the EU agenda on Roma inclusion. It's quite a huge problem, more and more all over Europe. And shaping the EU agenda on migration and integration. And that is also a big issue at the moment. See what's happening in Italy, for instance. Of course, you understand that as a politician, I'm proud of these results, but there is more to do in practice. And well, to give one comment of this day, I joined you from the early start at 9 o'clock this morning, and I think it is a little bit abstract all the time. It's too much abstract. And we know what's going on in the world, and we know what's happening in England and in Britain for a long time, to be honest. So I was a little bit disappointed about, but what are we going to do about it? And I didn't hear a lot about that. And of course it is difficult, and the problem's getting even worse, in my opinion. What I'm seeing all over Europe, what I'm seeing in the world, and I'm traveling a lot, also to China, but what I'm seeing is that the gap between rich and poor is only getting wider and wider on the moment, and that's a huge problem. That's really a huge problem, not only for the poor, but also for the rich. It's mentioned already today, and that's true. Because when we don't take care about the poor, we will lose our society as a whole. So that's a huge problem. So what we are doing, and now it brings me to my work on city level, and it is a little bit more, well, what we are doing. So it is not so abstract, but I hope you can pick some points out of it in a few. I only talk a few more minutes. Don't be afraid, Eddie. Well, that's also the problem. Always the problem with politicians. They are talking so much. They better go out for work. Well, I'm so sorry. Well, The Hague. I'm talking about The Hague now. The Hague is a nice city, really. It's nearby Delft. Delft is our neighbor. Well, there's 100,000 people living in Delft, and The Hague is a little bit bigger. 500,000, half million people. And our economy is in transition on the moment because the government is reducing and kicking out civil servants all the time. So, and the city of The Hague is with all the ministries, with the parliament, with the government. We are suffering from that because they are reducing the people, they're kicking them out. So we have to bring our economy in transition, and we are doing for the last 10 years now, and we are more and more being a city of peace, justice and security. And you know, the international tribunals are in the city of The Hague. We promote that as much as possible, and we are very proud of that, really, because Ban Ki-moon, he visited our city last year because of the 100th anniversary of the Peace Palace. It's also in The Hague, and Ban Ki-moon called us the international city of peace and justice. So we are very proud of that, and we are promoting that all over the world, not only for peace and justice, but also to attract all kinds of headquarters of companies to our city, and we are quite successful in that. And we are giving a lot of attention, and as an alderman, as a vice mayor, I give them a lot of support and help to 4 main economic clusters: oil and gas, telecom and ICT, pension funds. There's a lot of huge pension funds. ING is in The Hague, for instance, and insurance companies. And safety and security. The safety and security business is booming all over the world, but especially in The Hague. We have a lot of companies. We are able to attract a lot of safety and security companies to The Hague, and they are clustering together, and they develop all kinds of new innovations in the field of safety and security. And you can imagine that is necessary in this world. For instance, just think about the cyber crime. Oh, the time. Yeah, I'm sorry. So we are investing a lot of that. And why do we do that? Because we like to have employment. Employment for the people, because employment is the only way out of poverty, is our opinion. So, but I noticed, I'm now for 8 years in office as a vice mayor, I noticed that it is not enough. It's not enough to give support to these big economic clusters, because the labor market is asking more and more well-educated people. And we still have a lot of not educated people, also in our city. People, migrants from Morocco, from Turkey, but also just ordinary people from the Netherlands. They don't finish their school. They are not well educated for the labor market, and there's the problem, because the labor market, the society as a whole, is asking more and more for well-educated, well-trained staff personnel. So that's the problem for the future. What are we going to do with the people who are not well-educated or are not able to get well-educated because of their skills and so on? That's a huge problem, and I see it in myself, in my own city. Now, there is, in the labor market, there are 250,000 people are working. 44,000 people are unemployed. 44,000 people on 250,000. That's a lot. So that's a huge problem, and the only solution is, I think, education, education, education. And all my work is to support schools, education, clinical, vocal centers, and help employers to take young people, sometimes with some help, with some money. I just do it. Because when they are in the company, it's difficult, more difficult to kick them out again. So I give a little bit help in the beginning. So I hope that they will find a job, and otherwise they have something on their CV for the next job. So that's the way we try to do it, and well, I can talk for hours for that, but I hope we have the opportunity to discuss a little bit more when I'm sitting here on this chair. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and I will talk to you. Okay. Was it understandable?
Yes, thank you. Okay, thanks, Henk. Over to James now, who's been involved, obviously, in this process from the very beginning, just to give a kind of leader's view on what's been happening in York on this
Sure.
topic.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting day so far, listening to the contributions not only of people on the panels, but also in the audience. But like my colleague Hank Cole just now, I've been very interested in what are we actually doing and what are the outcomes. So hopefully I can talk about where I'm coming from, what we're doing, and what I would like to do. Fairness is very much the thing that gets me up in the morning, and I know that sounds like a strange term, but I want to live in a society where someone's hard work and talents determines the outcomes that they get in their life, not where they were born or what kind of school they go to. And therefore I've devoted myself to public service and reform. Now, the context in which leaders across the world are operating in is a time of one of the biggest economic crises since the war. And sometimes we forget that as a society of how difficult things actually are. We also have a number of vested interests within media and politics, which makes it harder to be able to bring that reform and that change. And also we live in a context, especially in England, where there isn't enough devolution or fair funding to local areas to actually make some of those differences. We also have a very, very cynical public. We have a situation where the public no longer trust politicians after the expenses scandal. They no longer trust the media after Millie Dowler phone hacking inquiry stuff. Don't trust many church leaders after accusations of abuse, and don't trust a number of pillars of our society. We also live in a situation where, in my opinion, the public in England at least have been lied to for the last at least 30 years on how their public services are paid for. And we're constantly in a situation where people demand Scandinavian quality public services, but expect that at American prices, and that is not possible. And as a nation, we don't really decide in which direction we are going to go in, and therefore get caught in the middle. Now, our vision for the city is not too dissimilar from many of my colleagues here across the political spectrum. It is about trying to help our most disadvantaged and help real people get into well-paid employment. Because we recognise when we can get people into well-paid employment, their children's education attainment increases, their health improves, domestic violence goes down, and many of the social ills that we try to tackle stem from those income levels. One of the things that we did in York is obviously set up a Fairness Commission, first outside of London, and we learnt from Islington, as many other Fairness Commissions have learnt from us. And one of the recommendations from that was to be a living wage employer, and we were very proud to be the first authority in Yorkshire Humber to do so. We also are investing public money to attract private sector investment. We recognise that economic growth is going to come from the private sector and not from the public sector as the state decreases. And therefore, to give people opportunities, we have to support the process of those jobs being created. And I very much take on board the view of Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, who says a city's economic growth and speed of economic growth is dependent on the health and well-being of its infrastructure, and therefore funding with public funds infrastructure is essential for that growing economy, which is essential for those new jobs for our most disadvantaged. In York, we are outperforming the region and the UK in economic growth and in unemployment. We have created a number of apprenticeships in the council, and a number of our partners across the city have created those as well, helping with youth unemployment and upskilling of people. We have now, and I'm very proud of this, job seekers allowance rate of only 1.4%, which is back to pre-recession levels, one of the lowest in the country. And we also have an economy that's now worth 4.3 billion a year. It was 4.27 billion in the pre-recession peak. So our economy essentially is back, as well as having the least number of people on key out-of-work benefits we've ever had. However, as much as I may be proud of some of those achievements and us playing our small part within that, working with partners, and as much as I may be pleased that we have 40% less children in workless households over the last few years, we do recognise that child poverty has increased. Underemployment has increased. People are not getting the same levels of income that they did before. And therefore I become concerned about how do you create that good growth? How do you get those higher level paid jobs? And therefore you have to realise that you've got to work with a range of partners, not just in York, but across the region, internationally. You have to try and work with as many people as possible for the benefit of mutual people. And also I'm concerned that the most people that we have that are in poverty are actually people who are in work. We as a nation are subsidising low wages using taxpayers' money through tax credits and so on, and that leaves me with great concern. The cost of living issues to do with energy, childcare and housing are very prevalent. One of the things we are trying to do is increase the level of housing construction in the city, which is not without its controversy. But I agree with George Osborne, which he said today, is that you have to deal with the cost of housing by increasing the supply. And that becomes controversial in all of our authorities, but it is the right thing to do. Two things I would like to do but don't have the powers to currently, and two possible solutions that would help, I think, in England. One is shifting housing benefit from becoming, for want of a better term, a landlord's benefit to actually becoming a benefit to be able to get into housing construction to deal with that supply. And I would advocate rent capping on a regional or sub-regional basis based on an independent body that would look at median income and cost of housing. I think there is an argument that something like that could be temporary. It could be for just the course of the next parliament, so you can sort out some of the supply issues, and then market forces would mean you wouldn't need that in the future. But at the moment we have a housing crisis that is not being resolved because of lack of public funds going to housing construction, especially for social housing. And it's a policy I've been pushing with all national parties. The second is with regards to the living wage. I believe that over the course of the next parliament, the minimum wage should be increased to the living wage incrementally based on key economic tests set by people who are far more clever than myself, and can determine that if the country meets those economic tests, then there would be an increase in the living wage, or minimum wage. Now the issue there becomes, businesses will say, well, how is this going to work? It's going to become uncompetitive compared to international markets. And one of the things I would say is, as a nation, we are spending tons of money not only subsidising those low wages, but we are also spending a lot of money in the administration of those low wages. And actually, if you shifted some of that money to tax concessions to businesses, you would actually be able to save the taxpayer money, give people a decent wage, and at the same time be able to have some dignity within work. And the last thing I suppose I'd like to say is something that's very much stuck with me that Dominic Strauss-Kahn said, who I've said on many an occasion should have been president of France before he was caught with his trousers down. But one thing that he did say is the current crisis in Europe is not an economic crisis, it is a crisis of politics. And it's a crisis that our national leaders across Europe are not making the decisions that are required because they are scared of the electorate. But in the meantime, the electorate suffer due to that lack of leadership. Thank you.
Going to keep moving on. Glyn, do you want to give us the view from Doncaster, from South Yorkshire, one of those, our neighbouring authorities?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me up on the stage today. It's a bit of a surprise to me because until 1 o'clock I didn't realise I was going to be here, so I haven't prepared anything. I haven't even got a tie, unlike my colleagues on the panel today. Doncaster, it's a mayoral authority. That means it's got an elected mayor. I'm its deputy mayor. I'm chosen by the mayor to represent her. And I'll never tire of saying that Doncaster has got an elected Labour mayor, particularly following the previous 4 years of having a mayor that wasn't particularly happy to go outside the borough and promote the borough. Which is why we are effectively where we are. We need to encourage be encouraged to go outside the borough and to sort of trade with our neighbours, promote ourselves, which is exactly what we're doing. So that's what we're doing as a borough. Internally, we don't have a fairness commission in Doncaster, which is quite sad. We were nearly there, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But unfortunately, all that got dismantled. So we are where we are. So we're in the process of forming a Fairness Commission in whatever guise it takes, whatever title it takes. There's a number of titles. Some of them are complete gobbledygook that's come back. But we're sticking with an issue of fairness in the title because it says what it is, essentially. So how did we get to where we are? I think James said it actually. When he mentioned about the public. They don't trust politicians, they don't trust the council, and they don't trust politics in general. So why are we actually doing this? Well, we're doing this to promote the individual causes of communities. Certainly that's the reason why we're doing it in Doncaster. And I think as the sessions have gone on today, different authorities are doing it for different reasons. But in Doncaster's case, it's because we've got so many different difficult decisions to actually make in our budgets, in our communities, and the knock-on effects that it has that we certainly need to have that involvement, real involvement with the communities out there. So that's the reason why we, along with our colleagues in the council, in the police, in the fire and rescue service, within the NHS, CCG, etc., all of the partners, the relative partners that we've got in the borough and indeed externally, bring them together to find out what we can do to minimise the effects of these difficult times that we're in. And times, I've got to say, not of our making in Doncaster, not of our political lead anyway. So what I'm wanting to do is take this forward. We've got a number of steps to perform within making this a reality. We've got to do all the boring stuff like develop terms of reference. We've got to bring people along with us, and that also involves going out to communities, not only in Doncaster, as I say, but externally, and bringing people forward, because we haven't invented the wheel, and it's pointless inventing the wheel, which is one of the reasons why I'm here today, to try and plagiarise, to take things from you, to see how it works better and doesn't cost us as much to get there, and that's exactly what I'm here for today. Oh, that's what I thought anyway. I'm here now. As far as I can see, the real challenge that I've got to do is to get people, as one of my colleagues said today, to face the same way and move forward. And that's in Doncaster what we're trying to do and what we intend to do, and I'm sure we will achieve it. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Joe. And hopefully we'll get a chance to hear some views from the floor as well. Some people who I'm sure have been involved in the process here who might want to feed into that conversation. Hi, Marco. Hi. Nice to see you.
Thank you. I'm an Italian, so my English isn't my first language either, but I'll do my best. I'm leader of Peterborough Unitary Authority, which I think gives me a huge advantage over any other authority that is not unitary, because I think unitaries are the way forward. My party would not necessarily agree with me, but you know, the experience I have leads me to believe that is exactly the case. I'm not going to stand here for several hours, so I'm going to be as quick as I can. 5 years ago, I became the leader of Peterborough. I became the leader of Peterborough because I thought I had this wonderful city in which I'd been brought up falling apart. It had gone off the scale as far as investment was concerned. Low ambition, low achievement, appalling education results, unemployment growing, and yet a city as beautiful as Peterborough was going backwards so fast it was impossible to try to even think that it was possible to stop. But we had to stop it, so I engineered a coup and became leader. And perhaps that was the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life, but we are where we are. Now, 5 years on, and you've heard it before, I genuinely believe that after having spent 25 years in the NHS, 17 of those as a trust chairman, the real answer to prosperity is good health and good education. Now, who knows which comes first? But I fall on the side of making sure you've got a really, really good education. And the rest of it will probably follow if with a little bit of luck. So what did we do in Peterborough? We decided that what small amounts of money we had, we would funnel into education and into trying to make sure that the most deprived of our children had a decent opportunity to get a really good education. So I'm proud to say that today, after 5 years, every single senior school in my city is either brand new or completely refurbished, and our education results are going through the roof. I wouldn't have believed it, it's great. We've created 5,000 primary school places, and we're in the process of creating another 3,200. So that gives you an idea of the number of new schools we've actually had to build. And don't forget, in 4 years, we've not put the rates up. We've protected frontline services. And how we managed to do that? We've done it because I believe that the business community have decided that the city wants to really grow. And it is about convincing everybody. It's about the perception that you genuinely mean what you say. So do what you say and say what you do. So Peterborough has grown now, is the fastest growing city in the UK. 27,000 people in 10 years, most of them from various parts of the EU. We've got the fourth biggest house building programme in the UK. As far as private sector job creation, second in the UK. And it's all about in making the right investments in the right place. We've got 1,200 businesses working with the Council's Economic Development Partnership to deliver apprenticeships, to deliver proper training, because let's face it, we've heard, we all share virtually the same problems. It's just finding what those solutions are, and those solutions are different for every city, so I make no criticism of everybody. It's just that what may work in Peterborough might not work in York, or may not work in Doncaster. But in Peterborough, we've got 1,200 businesses, all personally involved in the training and upskilling of our kids. Now, you know, what else have we done? I believe that one of the greatest things that we've achieved in Peterborough is the integration of a huge European and non-European community. When the riots were running all over the UK, remember, we've got 117 different languages spoken in my city. Just think about it. 117 different languages spoken in Peterborough. Even I don't know all the countries' names. And I thought I was really switched on when it came to my city. But the night of the riots, in front of our cathedral, we had nearly 3,000 people turn up for a candlelit vigil to tell EDL and all the other people that Peterborough wasn't the place where they're going to be welcome. And it was the place where we all live together as a single community. Now, if you want me to make a criticism, I do make a criticism of Europe. I've worked all my life. I've worked with the European community. I would hope to join the Committee of the Regions next year. We'll see. The nominations are going in January. But the reality of it is that actually Europe, the European Union, the Commission, has got to take some responsibility for the immigration. I mean, I'm a great believer in immigration. I'm an Italian. Why wouldn't I be? Look how well I've done in the UK. But they've got to take responsibility for having open borders, for having the transfer of employment and work across those borders. They can't just say, oh, well, this is a really good idea, thank you very much, get on with it. They've actually got to put their hands in their pockets, and they've got to help us local politicians in whatever country actually deal with the issue. And if we want open borders, the last thing we want is citizens, as we have some citizens in Peterborough, because we've just elected 3 UKIP councillors. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there is a message there, isn't there? And the message is, we don't believe you've got the European and immigration issues right. And I agree with them, we haven't. So it's also time that Europe worked with our national governments to say, where we've got this huge cross-flow of immigration, if it's beginning to cause tensions, bottlenecks within communities where those immigrants go, we have to deal with it, and we have to help those authorities to actually deal with those issues so it doesn't create resentment within those communities. That's what's been happening. It's not because, you know, the English people are horrible and don't want immigrants to come here. Quite rightly, they're worried about their jobs in a terrible economic situation that we've had in the last 4 or 5 years. They're worried about employment, how you pay your mortgages, can you get into the health service. So, you know, these are all issues that any normal, natural human being has to face. And we as politicians need to understand that. But we need to get that message, in my opinion, we need to get that message not just to our national politicians, but also to those people in in Brussels, who in a way are the authors of this, these policies that brings people across borders. And personally, I think it's a great thing. I welcome people who want to come to Peterborough, who want to come and work, who want to make a contribution. Let's face it, every time they go to work, we get taxes. They buy a house or rent a house, I get council tax. You know, they go into the shops and probably spend 60% of their income in our local economy. So it's good news if they want to come and work, but the public still has this feeling that there's something not quite right. And that's what we need to deal with before it becomes worse than something not quite right. Anyway, those of you that have never been to Peterborough, you're not going to be surprised for me to hear me say you should come, because it's a fantastic city. It's nearly as beautiful as York, but in its own right, it's a fabulous place. Thank you very much.
Peterborough nearly as beautiful as York. It's a great strapline. Okay, our final speaker of the day and of this afternoon session, the final session, is Simon Blackburn from Blackpool. So again, we're getting a different perspective, city with different challenges, different issues, which you got about 5 minutes or so to share with us, Simon, if you can.
Smashing.
Okay.
Thanks for hanging about to see the world's worst boy band. It's brilliant, isn't it? You sit here all day listening to academics and people that write books tell you that politicians aren't doing anything, right? And then when they finally let us tell you what we are doing, everybody's gone home. But thank you for staying. It makes us feel special. I did feel, Hank mentioned, there'd been a lot of sort of theoretical discussion, which you get with academics, don't you? And not an awful lot of what we're doing. So it's really nice to be able to have that conversation. So I'm not going to do all the usual stuff, whereby I tell you how poor Blackpool is, right? Just take my word for it. If you care, Google it, right? And you will find that we are either at the top or the bottom of any league table going, depending on which end you don't want to be at, yeah? And it's just something I've got used to. And I'm not going to talk to you about personal stories of poverty, because you've already heard from people that, you know, lived in a cardboard box eating gravel for breakfast, so you don't need to hear any more of that. Nor am I going to demand that we need to set up another commission or write another book or have another report. What I am going to do in 2 or 3 minutes, hopefully, is just tell you what we've done. Because we set up a Fairness Commission when the Labour group came to power in 2011. And fundamentally, what it comes down to is seeking to persuade or convince, occasionally intimidate, and very occasionally just bully people into doing the right thing. Because it's been too easy for too long to do the wrong thing. And it's actually like that in most cities and towns. But in a poor city or a poor town, it's very easy to do the wrong thing. We pay the living wage as a council, right? That's easy, you can do that. You can take the decision, James has done it here, did it before we did. Take the decision that you, the council, are going to do it. What you then do is you persuade or bully or intimidate all of your wholly owned companies to do the same thing, right? So the bus company does it, the tourism company does it, the marketing company does it. Then you get onto your contractors, and then your subcontractors. Then you develop an ethical procurement framework which says not only should you buy stuff locally, but actually you shouldn't be buying stuff off people that invest in guns and bombs and selling fags to kids on the other side of the world. Yeah, and if your pension fund is doing that, we don't want to deal with you. Lancashire County Council weren't happy with that conversation, but there we go. It's one less Christmas card. We had a firm of solicitors occupying a council building. And we discovered that actually they spent all their time getting people to sue the council for tripping and slipping on the pavement. So I took the decision to refuse to renew their lease because I didn't think that was a good idea. And we got taken to the High Court. and we lost, and it cost us £50,000. But the principle was the right thing, yeah? We want to encourage responsible entrepreneurship. We want to encourage social enterprise. We want to encourage people who, as Richard Wilkinson says, create the goods and create the jobs, but don't hoard all of the returns from that, because that's not what we need. Not what we need. The Blackpool South constituency has got the lowest average earnings of the whole of the United Kingdom. We've reduced the number of directors and very senior managers at the council. There was 35 of them when we took over in 2011. There's now 10. And do you know what? I haven't really noticed a huge amount of stuff not getting done. It's magic. Selective licensing. We're cracking down on bad landlords. We're going round and we're inspecting the life out of properties. We're making people have a licence to operate as a private sector landlord. And we're inspecting those properties. And if they're not fit for people to live in them, we stop paying housing benefit. I absolutely reflect James's comment before. I want control of housing benefit. I don't want it set nationally. I don't even want it set locally or sub-regionally. I want it. I want Blackpool Council to have it. Not temporarily, permanently. Because I want to make it impossible to be a bad landlord. I want to spend that money on building more council houses. We're building some already, but we need to build a lot more. Because that's how you knock the bottom out of the market for being a bad landlord. We provide free breakfast to all our primary school children in Blackpool. Costs about £1.5 million a year. Hugely increases attendance, attainment, behaviour. Kids are no longer sitting at school looking at the clock waiting for it to be time for lunch. They're actually focused on what they're doing. Through the Fairness Commission, which my colleague Amanda Bennett runs, they did this 100 acts of kindness, which came down to me volunteering at a dog rescue centre, people knitting, people making cups of tea, dancing with people with dementia. Just about everything you can think of, small practical steps that just made a tiny little bit of difference to people's lives. We've delivered turkeys to poor families at Christmas. We've collected and distributed toys to children who wouldn't otherwise receive them at Christmas. We are bold, we are radical, we're very, very passionate about providing universal services. We don't want stigma around who does and doesn't have breakfast in the morning. We want everyone to be entitled to it. Absolutely essential. There was a debate earlier, which I avoided getting into because I'd started a fight about whether universalism was the way forward, right? Just trust me, it is. It absolutely is. You cannot target resources the way that academics will tell you you can target resources. It's been tried all over the world and it doesn't work. I think that's it. Yeah, that'll do. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, all of you. So we've got about 15 minutes left, folks. We are going to finish on time. We've got one hand up over there. I think before we get into the questions, I think we have 3 questions from students, from local students. I'm looking at you guys, you're nodding, so you are the people I need to speak to. So, do we have a mic? Can we give a mic to these guys? And we can, what I'll do is this, let's hear the questions, and I'll maybe ask this one of you to stick your hand up, because if we round all 5, then we'll take the whole time dealing with each question. Okay, fire away.
We put together some questions for a form, so these 3 questions are decided from the whole school, basically.
Okay.
How can we justify sending so much on foreign aid when we have people in this country who are in poverty?
Okay, so the question about foreign aid. Why should we be sending money overseas when we've got food banks in the UK, I guess, is the question. James, do you want to?
I think it's a moral duty. When you look at some of the poverty internationally compared to here, we're now, I think, 4th richest country again. I think we were 5th before. Then it shows that we have a responsibility to people of the world. But also, sometimes British people don't understand enough that having better outcomes internationally also helps you save money in the long term through international conflict. Otherwise you spend money on defence, you spend money on counter-terrorism and so on. And this is why, and I don't want to get into the subjects about the Middle East, but this is why an economic roadmap to peace in those areas is incredibly important for Britain's security and for British people.
Okay. I don't know, hang from a Dutch perspective.
Just to add a little bit more, to make it more sharp, when we don't bring the money, they will come to get it. That's the answer.
Okay, so this idea of...
Can we just say what percentage is much smaller than people actually think of the total budget? What, less than 5%?
I think it's about that.
The target was 0.7%, and we haven't reached the target yet.
Okay, so again... Yes, of course, yeah.
Can I just say, very little of that money that we send overseas is actually gifted, give it away, here's some food at the end of the week. And that's very necessary, because otherwise those people will die. But don't forget, a lot of that money that goes overseas is actually well spent. It's actually used to help them develop their own economies. So actually, they look after their own lives and become more sufficient. And quite frankly, in a lot of the major investments overseas, the governments that give the investment ask that that money is spent with their own companies to do the work in those overseas countries where the money is given. So it's not as black and white as it appears. It is the right thing to do, but then the government that gives the aid in a lot of ways does benefit, because it then has another company or another community with which to trade, who's got the money, who will then develop and trade with us as a business partner.
Okay, thank you. And your second question, please?
Yeah. Some children are told by their parents that it costs too much to go to university. What can we do to change their attitude in our poorer communities?
Okay, so the question of fees. Simon?
University and education has changed dramatically over the last 20, 30 years. I'm old enough to have been to university when you didn't have to pay, when you got a grant. But James mentioned before about people being lied to about where the public services come from. And actually, if you want 25% of the population to go to university, we got given a little brochure when we came in here today telling us all about this place. Yeah. One part of the elite, remember that word, elite Russell group of universities. Yeah. The middle of a £750 million campus. Right? If you want 25% of the population to go to elite universities, which cost £750 million to build classrooms, then someone's got to pay for it. Yeah, that is the harsh truth of the matter. And I firmly believe that should be done through general taxation. So people should pay for that through the taxes, and that's fair to everybody. But that's not the way it's panned out. The way it's panned out is that people have to pay. There is no way that any of my children will go to university because they couldn't afford it. I can't afford it, they couldn't afford it. It's a disgusting system. The way you respond to that and the way you deal with that, though, is to vote. Yeah? And everyone needs to vote, and everyone needs to get angry about that because it's an absolute disgrace.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to widen that one out because otherwise we're going to lose our time that's left. And the third question, please, from your school.
York Council have installed the living wage. So what are you going to do now to keep pushing government to bring it in nationally? And should we not have a maximum wage?
Okay, on Twitter, interesting conversation. Interesting conversation on Twitter at this event about the idea of maximum wage, ceiling on earnings. I don't know whether I'm going to open that up. People, James, you want to get started?
It's, in terms of the living wage, I think I said before, I've been trying to push an increase in the minimum wage to the living wage, and I think there are ways of doing that. But in terms of a maximum wage, it slightly becomes more difficult. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. But you end up in a situation where we live in such a global economy that people can decide to leave to go to other countries to be able to then pay possibly less taxes in those countries and then not pay them. Well, I understand, and you may say good riddance, but then when they're not paying the taxes here and then people can't gain access to the NHS, everybody loses out. Where we should be working is on international policy over those issues. If the European Union was working in the way I would like to see it work, you would end up having greater harmonisation over those taxation powers and those kind of regulations, so that it would make it harder for those people to pick off national governments against each other for large company investments and for individual billionaires. I think that supranational cooperation is important and essential to that being progressed. Otherwise, we end up in the situation we're in now, where a number of companies have GDPs and power larger than many nations.
Any other? Simon, did you want to comment on that?
I always think it's interesting to understand where people think the maximum wage ought to be. Generally speaking, just a bit above what they earn. It's when people talk about wanting to take cars off the road, what they're actually talking about is taking everybody else's car off the road, not their own. I think you need to make a distinction between average earnings and the very small number of people who earn sums of money that we simply cannot relate to. Premiership footballers being an example, merchant bankers, stockbrokers, and how those salaries are in any way justified.
Okay.
And that comes back to the conversation we were having earlier on this morning about how people value carers and how much carers get paid compared to bankers and how much people value them.
What the second part of that question is about the articulation between the local and the national. We're in a kind of general election territory, general election here within the year. The question is about, we talked a bit about all the kind of local area stuff is all very well, but can we have a better articulation with the national conversation? Any sense that that's happening? Any sense that, you know, that there is this pockets of activity at a local level and that's fine? Or are other things happening? Should other things be happening?
The trick is identifying the vested interests, and which there will always be in politics and society to a certain extent. And it's working out where there is political advantage for whatever political party of pushing the policy like that. And I'm meeting a number of people in different political parties trying to push this agenda. Quite often they see the logic of what I'm pushing, but it's trying to get across to them the political advantage in terms of them accepting those policies.
Okay. I'm going to see if we've got a couple of questions. Yes, the gentleman there.
I can add something to that, because, well, there's often, everyone is talking about local or regional authorities, but I prefer to say it is the first authority, because the local and regional authorities are the first who met the people, the ordinary people. They are the first who met all the problems, and they are the first who will come with solutions. So that kind of awareness has to be bringing on the table also on the national level. And, well, I'm sure that also in England there is a foundation from local authorities or communities, and you have to make a fist together to make things happen on national level. That's how we do it in the Netherlands.
Okay. Yes, can you just introduce yourself briefly and then give us your question, please? Or your
I guess the
comment?
heading, is it working?
I think so. Yeah.
Sorry.
We can hear you fine.
I guess the heading of this session, the role of civic leaders, primarily refers to their effort for fairness in the community. And quite aptly in the beginning, it was referred to all the gentlemen and no ladies here. And also it was referred a few times about education, and health. I would suggest that our civic leaders would benefit from focusing particularly education for women. Unless and until there is equality of opportunity for women to become leaders of their societies, we are not going to get fairness. Fairness begins from home. Women have got a great deal to offer and also experience in creating fairness within their own family. And they also, particularly girls, will become mothers of the future, the first educator of the next generation. So it is very important that we inculcate that sense of fairness by creating more opportunity and equal rights for our women. And the political leaders will benefit from focusing on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll take one final question, comment if we have one, before I ask James to finish today's session off.
Thank you. I find myself seething with passion, as usual. It's obscene, the differential between maximum people with money. They don't need all that money. You're only going to get them to... And we've got that thing in the rotunda, and it said they marched. They marched. When did they get fair treatment? It was when they marched. and when they demonstrated and when they said to politicians, we've had enough. We've had enough, we can't take it anymore, this is what they're going to do about it. The gentleman there is raising his fist. The people in India marched when they walked when their land was being taken away. Politicians don't listen until you stand up and say face to face, we don't appreciate what you're doing, we need you to alter what you're doing to actually take account of what's happening to us. We have to have a voice, we have to speak out. Please listen.
Thank you. So, James, you've had a lot of opportunity to listen today. You've had a lot of chance to kind of soak up these conversations. I don't know whether you've got a few thoughts about some of the content, your own views on how it's gone?
A few. I mean, this is the first time York has hosted such a conference with also international speakers and with academics. I think there's a learning curve from that, and I'd be interested in people filling in their comments on the flip chart that's just by the exit, and also emailing us at fairnessyork.gov.uk about that, because today is about listening and taking on board people's views over what is a very, very important agenda. There is a certain amount of food left outside. Please do either take some, or if not, it will be donated to the Peace Home Centre, which I think shows the commitment to fairness today. We want to thank a number of our partners, not just the local authority leaders who are here, but also One and Other, Stephen Burke for the Invisible Man art installation, ICE, and a number of other organisations that I'm bound to forget and then offend everyone by not mentioning. There is the graphic at the back, which please do take a look at, which is basically contextualising what has been said today before the graphic goes. The video will be on YouTube, so anyone can look back at what anyone has said and also take ideas and inspiration from that. But what I've really taken away and found fascinating is what Professor Alan Walker was saying about politics matters, and also the personal experiences of Tracy Robbins earlier. I mean, I won't go on at length, everyone wants to go home, but this university is what gave me many opportunities in life, and I do dedicate myself to trying to make sure other people have those opportunities. So it's very fitting that this conference is being held in this locality. And we've had the articulation of the issues and wanting to hear those solutions. But I think the views expressed earlier, especially just now, shows the disconnect that there is between public and politicians. And that is something that has to be drastically addressed. And that disconnect is on both sides. It is when politicians attempt to engage, even on the doorstep, people say, I'm not interested, whilst at the same time, in reverse, people say, you never come and talk to us. And therefore, finding the right ways of engagement and the right way of hosting and holding those conversations is important. And things like today are a step towards that. They're not the solution. But I'm hoping that from this, we can have further conversations about those very, very important issues that affect all of us. We're going to continue as a council working with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation over some of these. We're going to continue the debate on Twitter at the hashtag #FairnessYork. And we're very much looking forward to trying to further what we're doing over this very, very important agenda, because we want to help all real people, not just in York, but across the country and across the world. Thank you.